I am sorry to be doing another miserable video two days in a row, so I do apologise. If there was something to be happy about, if there's something to laugh about, believe you me, I'll be doing it rather than this, whether it was Dembele's, Pringles, Cruffins, Muffons, whatever we want to call it, moustaches, or anything else. That's what we would be discussing. The poppycockomometer, I'd rather be doing any of that fun stuff, I really would. But things are a little bit gloomy at West Ham at the moment, and I still think there's more fallout from the video that I did yesterday, which was based on a load of off-the-record comments which were made to Claret and Hugh, which have got me really, really worried. Now, look, you don't have to believe the comments. You don't have to believe my take on them. I'm pretty happy with the validity of the information. Let's just put it that way. It doesn't make for good reading from West Ham. The overview of it is that there is a disjointed transfer mechanism. I was going to call it a strategy. I'm going to fall shy of calling West Ham's transfer market dalliances a strategy. I think it's a faltering mechanism. I'm going to put it in those sort of terms. Without going over old ground in terms of why we recruited a director of football, something's not quite going right there. As I understand it, there is a transfer committee. No one's going to ever know fully what goes on within that room. Nobody's going to sit there. And I do believe the committee is this. I do believe it's David Sullivan, Mark Noble, Tim Steidten and David Moyes. No one's going to sit there and type down the minutes of it. It's a private meeting. I don't think you're going to get word for word stuff leaked out, but I think you're going to get frustrations. I'm pretty sure none of it comes from David Moyes. He's a closed book on this sort of thing. He keeps his cards close to his chest. He really does. And so, stuff's coming from elsewhere, certainly. What's clear is that people cannot agree on the players that we should be bringing in. And this is a massive hindrance. And for that reason, I think David Sullivan's either got to back David Moyes or he has to sack David Moyes. And, it almost doesn't matter at this point which one it is, because this halfway house, this course that we seem to be plotting in between everything is just not working. It's the old saying about trying to be all things to all men. You can't do that. At some point, you have to pick your course and you just have to go for it. I understand why David Sullivan would want to retain David Moyes because of what he's done over the last 2 or 3 years and for winning us our first trophy. But if you're going to do that, then stick with it. I suggest don't bring in the director of football. I think the moment you bring in a director of football, you've probably muddied the waters. Now, my own opinion is, I don't really want to get into my own opinion on this. My own opinion is I would have rather the director of football comes in and just gets to decide who we buy and who we sell. However, the moment you bring it in, it muddies the water, really. Because let's take the João Palhinha transfer. David Sullivan has tried to appease David Moyes by saying, okay, I will buy João Palhinha. We will never know the composition of that room, but I think in that room, my guess is that one person wants João Palhinha, and that's David Moyes. David Sullivan clearly doesn't think it's a good transfer. I don't know. I can't speak on whether Mark Noble thinks it is. I'm going to guess that Tim Steidten doesn't think it is. My guess is only David Moyes think that's a good signing. Steidten would think there's somebody younger, possibly from the Bundesliga or elsewhere, who could do the job. Mark Noble, don't know. Can't speak for Mark Noble. I'm not going to speak for Mark Noble. David Sullivan is unhappy with the outlay of the money. We absolutely know that. So I think there comes a point where he has tried to back David Moyes. When David Moyes has really pushed for João Palhinha. And David Sullivan said, okay, do you know what? I'll bid for him. And he has bid for him. Fulham have turned it down. And this is where he's half-backed David Moyes. Because I think you either say, no, David, I'm not buying Palhinha, he's too old. Or you say, yes, I'm going to get him for you. Either back the manager or sack the manager. If what David Moyes has decided is his system can only thrive with Palhinha there, you have to go and get Palhinha. And I don't even like saying it because I don't want to bring him in. I do think it's too high. But it's a halfway house. So I think to go in there and say, do you know what, David, we've bid 45 million for him, then we've bid 50 million for him, which is what I understand it we've done. Now I'm not going to bid any higher. I understand it. I actually understand it from all points of view, but it's not helping us. Too many cooks and all that sort of thing. So at what point, if you're going to do this committee, do you draw a line in the sand and say, OK, we can't get Polina, now it's over, we're going to get Tim's guy in? And here's what I do know from the club. At the moment, the club are concerned that if they get Steidten's recommendations, that David Moyes isn't going to play them. Let me just say that again. The club are concerned that if Tim Steidten picks our central midfielder, David Moyes won't play him. At that point, you either have to back David Moyes or you have to sack him. David Moyes has said, I want this player in Polina. The club have said, OK, we'll try and get you that player. The club can't afford to get that player. The club don't want to spend any more. The club don't even want to spend 50 million on him. But that's what they've gone up to. OK, Moyesy, here's your player. At that point, they can't get him. So at that particular point in the transfer negotiation, it's a case of, right, Moyes, we can't get your player. Now we're going to try and get Tim's player. That's how West Ham think the system should work. This council, this sort of, I don't know, this committee, this transfer committee, let's call it that. But I don't think that's how David Moyes sees it working. And now Sullivan's frightened if he goes with Tim Steidten, one, David Moyes is not going to play him. It's an absolute mess. It's now hindering us. It's actually hurting the football club, and it's hurting our transfers. And Sullivan seems to be between a rock and a hard place, and I don't quite understand it. And the reason I don't understand it is this is a hard-nosed businessman who's made himself into a billionaire. He's sacked people before, right? It's almost like he lacks the true belief and true clarity to understand what's good for the club and what the direction of the club is. So if David Sullivan truly believed that the direction of the club is to bring in a director of football, he loved the Brighton model. He loves what's going on in Brighton. I know that. I know that for a fact. David Sullivan loves what's happened at Brighton. He loves the idea. He doesn't know any statistics himself, but he's bought in to this whole view of doing a statistical-based recruitment process. He doesn't understand it, but he's bought into it. He's seen it at Brighton. He thought, I want one of those. So again, once you commit to that path, do it. But again, he's sort of gone with a halfway house. Oh, I sort of want to do that. I also don't want to upset Moyesy. So he's trying to plot this course through the middle. It's neither that nor that. It's straight down the middle. And it's failing. And then we hear that old Carlos Borges, Gorgeous Borges coming in. That's not been agreed that everybody on the transfer committee thinks he should come in. Well, this is just a nightmare. If they get this too far wrong, then he's not going to sign. The kid's not going to sign. Because he's going to get a whiff of this as well. I say a whiff of it. A whiff of that he's not universally wanted by a club. That's really important. What do I know? I've never signed a player in my life. But I'd imagine if I was a player, I'd want to hear that the club really want you. Everyone at the club wants you. I'm pretty sure that Declan Rice wanted to know that Edu wanted him, that Stan Kroenke wanted him, and Mikel Arteta. That everyone was on board, they all wanted him. And I'm sure they did. I think it's really important that we do that with footballers as well. And if what David Moyes wants to do, and this is the way where you back him or sack him, if what David Moyes wants to do is get another lumpy big geezer up front, he wants to get a stopper in midfield, he wants to get James Ward-Prowse, he wants to make Thomas Souček captain, or whatever the case may be, and he's going to score loads of set plays next season, then you've got to go for it. Back him. Let him. If he wants to do Land of the Giants and be set piece specialist, let him do it. Back him. If what you're saying, no, we don't want to do that, we're going to go with a director of football, we're going to build a young team, then you have to do that. But you can't do both. The both appears to be hurting us. I'm not going to say killing us at the moment, because we've not had a single game. All right, we haven't had a single game. I asked some of you yesterday, I said, write your team down. And a couple of people wrote down their team and said, that's not too bad, is it? And truth of the matter is, we don't know. We absolutely don't know. Football's all about winning games. At the end of the day, it really is. I suspect, that this transfer strategy is going to hinder us. So I did call it a strategy in the end, didn't I? It's going to hinder us. It's going to result in us losing games. I suspect it might not. We might start off the season winning games, in which case, who knows. But I find this a really, really weird one. I absolutely do. And I say I'm sick of it. I'm not quite sick of it yet, but I'm very, very concerned. And I'm more concerned with the noises that are coming out of the club than anything else. If I believed that there was a coherent transfer strategy and we would sign the players and everyone was on board, and we were just working our way through the list of targets because we had a slow start, I wouldn't mind so much. But what I'm hearing is it's disjointed. I'm hearing that David Moyes can't get the players that he wants. That David Moyes wants this player, but the club will only bid so much for that. That David Sullivan wants to pick Tim Steidten's players, but David Moyes won't play them. This is really bad. And quite frankly, they all need their heads banging together. Some more than others. And it's actually going to take something ruthless to happen. But we know David Moyes gets a reputation for dithering and delaying, and he does. But Sullivan dithers and delays as well in his decision-making with the manager. And I understand it would look incredibly harsh if West Ham were to sack David Moyes. You can imagine the ticker tape on Sky Sports, can't you? West Ham sack the manager that won their first trophy in 43 years. It's quite a long ticker tape, isn't it? But you can see it on Sky Sports News. You know what I mean. It would look harsh, wouldn't it? But if what is really going on are those rumours that actually David Moyes is stifling us and stopping us signing players, then you sort of have to do something about it. I've said this numerous times, that if we're going to sign 4 players, let David Moyes... If David Moyes is only here for one more year, let David Moyes sign one of them. If we've got this wonderful bounty, this bit of Declan cash, which means over the next 2 years we can spend £100 million. If buy one established player, fine. One sort of person that's approaching their 30s, fine. But the rest of it's got to be spent on young players. If David Moyes is stopping us doing that, and what David Moyes wants to do is spend all the Declan Rice money on old players, someone has to stop him. That can't be allowed. That really can't. We can't afford to waste that money where there's no return. Because he won't care, because he ain't going to be here. So I do think that's really, really important. And if that's the case, then something needs to be done. And whilst I'm annoyed with Moyes, and I do see Moyes as the problem, David Sullivan has to deal with it. Ultimately, David Sullivan's the boss. He's got to look at it. He's got to look at it and think, there's disharmony within this. Do you know what? I was actually going to say within this sort of transfer council. It's not just a transfer council, is it? David Moyes has still not appointed another coach yet. Now, I understand that Alan Irvine has signed on, but that's still on an advisory role. Alan Irvine's not at the training ground every day. He's basically doing what he was doing anyway. We still have lost Warburton and Nevin, and no one has come in. And that's despite Steve Round not having a job. I mean, I can't see any value in us delaying Steve Round coming in, right? If that's the guy, this is someone that's worked with David Moyes before. We need him on the training ground now, right now. We need people on the training ground. We need players in right now. More than anything else, what you need right now is leadership. And ultimately, even though David Moyes is manager, ultimately, the leader here is the majority shareholder of the company. I'm sorry to call it a company, but when you are talking about trading hundreds of millions in players, that part is the company. The football side is the football side. Ultimately, the chairman, the major shareholder, is David Sullivan. And David Sullivan's actually going to need to make a decision now. He can't let this drag on because it's at the detriment of West Ham United. So I say it again. We need signings now. I would rather they are not Polinia and James Ward-Prowse and the Jolly Green Giant. I'd rather that didn't happen, right? Because that's David Moyes' way. But we need players in. So either back him and go with that. And do this whole set-piece team. Or back the courage of your convictions and back the technical director or football director that you appointed and allow him to do his job.